Why did 5 rifles suddenly aim at the quiet woman everyone thought they knew? Rachel Cross stood at the Fort Bragg firing range, a morning that had begun with routine shattered in seconds. 5 M4 rifles locked on her chest. The bark of attack dogs tore through the air. And then, cold steel cuffs snapped into place around her wrists before she even turned her head. Rachel Cross, you're under arrest for impersonating a Navy SEAL and theft of classified intelligence. The voice belonged to Sergeant Hayes, his tone brutal, his knee grinding into her back. Around them, Delta operators froze in disbelief. Training drills ceased mid-motion. The sudden silence felt heavier than the gunmetal sky overhead. They'd faced chaos in foreign deserts, bloodied ambushes in distant cities. But here, at their own firing range, the unthinkable unfolded. The woman who had set their targets every morning was face down on concrete, treated like an enemy combatant. Rachel didn't resist. She let gravity and force do their work, cheeks scraping against hot cement, lips splitting, the taste of blood bitter in her mouth. To fight would have been too easy for them, an excuse for escalation. Instead, she went still, a statue wrapped in control. But her eyes, those hazel eyes flecked with gold, sharp as a hawk's, didn't break. They swept over every face, memorizing them, one after another, until they landed on the far corner. Colonel Marcus Webb, watching with a faint, knowing smile. The kind of smile predators wore when they believed the trap had already sprung. Rachel's hand, hidden beneath her body, formed the smallest signal, thumb and forefinger 13. It vanished as quickly as it appeared. None of them noticed, but she knew. This wasn't the end of something. This was only the beginning. Hours earlier, the day had begun like every other. 05:45. Rachel unlocked the firing range with deliberate precision. 3 years of routine hadn't dulled her discipline. She checked locks, swept her eyes across perimeters, then moved to the weapons cache. Rifles, pistols, magazines. To anyone else it was maintenance. To her it was ritual. Her right hand shook slightly as she lifted an M4. Most assumed coffee jitters, or exhaustion, but Rachel knew the truth. Scar tissue, nerve damage from a wound long ago. The tremor never left her, so she adapted, shifting seamlessly to her left hand, breath controlled, motions fluid. Jake from the maintenance crew noticed, offering casual concern. Rough night. Rachel gave a smile that didn't reach her eyes, something like that. But beneath the smile, her mind replayed the same unspoken routines, checking every exit before stepping into a room, sitting with her back to walls, never doors, keeping her phone angled 45 degrees to catch reflections, blind spots hidden in glass. The knife in her boot checked every dawn, always ready, always remembering. That morning, trouble announced itself in whispers, not shouts. Captain Brooks arrived first, immaculate uniform, perfect blonde hair, disdain painted on her face. She glanced at Rachel with barely concealed disgust. Safety officers, glorified janitors with clipboards. Lieutenant Park came next, cyber specialist in tow, an RFID scanner in his hands. He passed it over Rachel's badge 3 times, frowning. Systems glitchy today. His eyes lingered too long, too curious. Then Williams, heavyset, swaggering, a calculated shoulder check as he passed. Oops, sorry, safety girl. Rachel absorbed it all silently, her expression calm, neutral, but inside something shifted. The wolves were circling. Minutes later, the Delta team thundered in, still loud with adrenaline from earlier drills. Sergeant Davis, their point man, barked across the range. Yo, safety girl, set up lane 7. Real warriors need it now. Rachel obeyed, movements fast, efficient, unremarkable until the timer was checked. 47 seconds, half the record. Davis's eyebrows twitched upward, then he smirked it away. Beginner's luck, bet you can't do it again. Williams toppled her bin deliberately, scattering 200 rounds across concrete. Better hurry, janitor. Rachel knelt, hands steady, precise. Without looking, she began sorting, one caliber from another, speed of touch guiding her. 90 seconds later, the ammo lay perfectly ordered, boxed, stored. Park whispered to his partner, "That's impossible." A curious private threw a question. "What's the effective range of an Mk-18? Rachel answered instantly, with exact figures and tactical nuance. That wasn't trivia, that was combat memory. The air grew taut. Suspicion spread like static electricity. Then Colonel Webb entered. The room shifted with him, posture straightened, voices lowered. He didn't need to demand attention. He was attention. Silver threading his hair, tall, calm, a predator in uniform. When his eyes landed on Rachel, the world froze for half a second. Recognition flickered, then vanished behind his mask. He placed himself in her injured side periphery, deliberate, testing, measuring her. Rachel's watch buzzed with a single encrypted message, "Package arriving today." Her thumb erased it instantly. Too late. Park scanners flagged the signal. "Sir," he whispered, "military-grade encryption." Around Rachel, rumor became certainty. Subtle eyes, hushed conversations, casual positioning of soldiers at exits. The noose tightened. Miguel, the old janitor, shuffled close, voice low. "Careful today, Mika. Too many brass, too many eyes." Rachel nodded once. "I'm always careful." Miguel saw the second meaning. He nodded too. The cracks widened when Captain Brooks spotted the scars. Rachel's jacket rode up, revealing neat surgical lines across her ribs. "Car accident?" Brooks asked. Rachel lied without hesitation. "Long time ago." But Brooks's sharp eyes had seen combat wounds before. These weren't accidents. The final straw came when a private's rifle discharged by mistake. Panic rippled. Soldiers froze. Rachel didn't. In 4 seconds she had disarmed him, cleared the weapon, calmed the trembling boy with a nerve pressure technique only warfighters knew. "Where'd you learn that?" Brooks snapped. Rachel's face flickered. For a breath, Syria came back, the bruises, the blood, a woman's voice cutting through chaos. "Pain is data. Fear is death." Rachel smoothed her mask. "YouTube videos." But her voice was flat, hollow. Nobody believed it. Whispers spread, "Ghost unit combat scars, classified file." Then Williams pressed harder. He shoved an M4 into her hands. "Prove it, bet you can't even shoot." Rachel hesitated, then inspected the rifle. Rear sight 2 clicks off. 5 rounds fired, grouping tight but shifted. Williams jeered. "See, just another wannabe." Rachel adjusted, switched hands. Left side steady. 5 rounds, 1 hole, center target. The range went silent. It wasn't accuracy that silenced them. It was the way she breathed, the stance, the minute adjustments, the rhythm of someone forged in fire. A visiting colonel whispered, "That's Ghost Unit protocol. I saw it in Syria, once. Never forgot it." Webb intercepted him smoothly, escorting him out before the word spread too far. But it was too late. The seed had taken root. Rachel knew then, escape routes were gone. The cage was closing. Facial recognition checks pinged alarms in databases. Park wasn't cleared to touch. Red letter warnings flashed, eyes only, classified, unauthorized access. And when Rachel's wallet slipped from her pocket, an old photo of 7 women in tactical gear, faces blurred, Syrian terrain clear as daylight, Brooks grabbed it. "Your college airsoft team," she sneered. Rachel snatched it back too fast. "Yeah, something like that." The lie landed heavy. Everyone felt it. Then came the second encrypted buzz. "Urgent. Bishop compromised. Execute Protocol 7. Rachel's skin turned to ice. She deleted it with trembling fingers, but Park caught fragments. His voice went pale. "Protocol 7, she's real." Webb's phone vibrated. His eyes darkened as he listened. A single nod to Hayes. The trap was ready. Rachel excused herself under pretense of a bathroom break. Every exit had MPs casually standing near, maintenance tunnels covered, every route sealed. She returned calm, outwardly casual, inwardly poised on the knife's edge, weight balanced, muscles loose, ready to explode if needed. Then Hayes barked, "Now." 5 MPs descended. To the Delta operators it looked chaotic. To Rachel it was choreography, moves she'd seen before. She didn't fight. She went limp, forcing them to wrestle her body into control. Every cuff a deliberate grind past regulation, every strike just short of breaking bones. Blood filled her mouth again. Her ribs ached. Through it all, her eyes never left Webb. And Webb, watching with satisfaction, saw exactly what he wanted. Or so he thought. What did Webb really see when he looked into her eyes? To everyone else in the interrogation room, Rachel was a captive, a civilian officer cornered by military power, restrained in a chair, wrists bound in steel. But Webb knew better. He circled her slowly, savoring the moment, as if walking around prey that had already been trapped. His boots clicked against the concrete floor in measured rhythm, like a metronome of authority. "Hello, Ghost 7, he said softly. 5 years. You stayed dead a long time." Rachel's face remained calm, voice even. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm a range safety officer. Check my file." Webb laughed, but it was an empty, humorless sound. "Oh, I checked your file. A masterpiece of fabrication. Employment gaps marked as medical leave. A provisional clearance that requires higher access than most contractors will ever dream of. Convincing to anyone who doesn't know better." He leaned down, inches from her face. His cologne mixed with the harsh scent of metal and sweat. "But I know better, because I was there when your unit deployed to Syria. Operation Blackwater." Rachel's tactical watch registered her first spike in heart rate all day. She felt it, too, the sharp thud in her chest, but her face remained a mask. "I don't know any Operation Blackwater," she said. Webb smirked. "Don't insult me. Sarah Martinez, demolitions. Maya Chen, sniper. Jessica Williams, medic. Ashley Thompson, communications. Diana Roberts, point woman. Catherine Mitchell, team leader. All dead because of my intelligence, my bad intelligence." He savored each name, rolling it slowly, watching for cracks in Rachel's facade. Her jaw tightened, a muscle ticking in her cheek. That was enough for him. "And you," Webb continued, "the youngest of them, the quiet one, the one who was supposed to die with them, but you didn't, did you? You crawled out of Syria alive and disappeared." Rachel's voice stayed steady, but her eyes shifted, colder than before. "I don't know those names." Webb's smirk grew. He grabbed her sleeve and tore the fabric with a violent rip. Beneath, the tattoo emerged, intricate, unmistakable. A serpent eating its own tail. Inside the circle, 7 stars inked with deliberate precision. 6 marked. 1 left unnamed. "There she is," Webb whispered, running a finger over the ink. "Ghost 7, the survivor, the one who got away." Something changed in Rachel then. The meek range officer was gone. In her place sat a warrior, silent but unbroken. She lifted her chin, her gaze steady. "What do you want, Marcus?" His eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "What I've always wanted, to clean up loose ends. You see, Operation Blackwater wasn't a failure of intelligence. It was a transaction. 7 women stumbled onto something you weren't supposed to. My arrangement with certain Syrian elements, and so 7 had to die." "6 died," Rachel corrected coldly. "I survived." "And that's been my problem, hasn't it? You were supposed to vanish. But here you are, hiding in plain sight, pretending to be a safety officer. Clever. You learned that from me." Rachel's lips curved slightly, almost into a smile. "You taught me more than you realized." Something flickered in Webb's expression. Hesitation, unease. She wasn't afraid, she wasn't broken. "What aren't you telling me?" he demanded. "I'm telling you I'm nobody," Rachel replied. "Just a woman who knows how to shoot." But Webb wasn't listening anymore. His eyes were fixed on the tattoo, the seventh star still unmarked. "Why didn't you ink your own name?" he whispered. "Survivor's guilt." "Or maybe," Rachel said, voice quiet but sharp as glass, "because the mission isn't over." The words hung heavy in the air. Before Webb could answer, the door crashed open. Armed men stormed in, movements precise, silent, lethal. Their uniforms bore no insignia, but the way they flowed into the room left no doubt. SEAL Team 6. Behind them strode a man whose presence shifted the atmosphere instantly. General Morrison. His voice was calm, conversational, almost too casual for the weight of the moment. "Hello, Marcus," Morrison said, hands clasped behind his back. "Fancy seeing you here." Webb spun, panic breaking through his mask. His hand shot for the device in his pocket. "Stay back, I've got files, every ghost operator in the field. One button and they're compromised. Beijing, Moscow, Tehran, they'll all know." "You mean this device?" The voice was Rachel's. Webb's eyes dropped. His pocket was empty. Rachel's hands were free, cuffs dangling loose. The device already sat in her palm. "Hell, when did I get free?" she finished for him. Her voice carried steel now. 30 seconds after you dismissed the guards. Dislocated thumbs are painful but effective. You were so busy talking you didn't notice." She stood smooth, controlled, the transformation complete. The victim was gone, the predator had arrived. 5 years, Marcus. I've waited 5 years for you to confirm what I already knew. You needed to gloat. You needed to believe you'd won. Thank you for the confession." Webb's eyes widened. "Confession." Rachel tapped her collar. A tiny transmitter blinked red. The wire caught every word. Rage broke through Webb's fear. He lunged. Rachel's movements were efficient, surgical. A strike to his shoulder, a sweep of his legs, and Webb collapsed to the floor, paralyzed from the neck down. "Temporary," she told Morrison calmly. "He'll recover in 6 hours, enough time to process him properly." The SEALs stared at her with awe. One whispered to another, "Is that really Ghost 7, the Ghost 7? Morrison nodded. "Gentlemen, meet the only survivor of Operation Blackwater, and the woman who just played the longest game in intelligence history to bring down a traitor." Rachel knelt beside Webb. Her voice dropped to a whisper only he could hear. Whatever she said made his eyes widen in terror. Later, Morrison asked what she'd told him. Rachel's answer was simple. "I told him about the insurance files I've gathered on his family. He stays in prison, they stay safe. He tries anything, well, I learned from the best." Park's investigation unraveled the truth quickly. Brooks was unmasked as Webb's plant, feeding him intelligence. Hayes and Williams, though guilty of arrogance, had simply followed orders, blind to the betrayal they served. Their shame became punishment enough. Cooper, the veteran who had defended Rachel, was commended and promoted. "I knew she was special," he said. "I just didn't know how special." As for the Delta operators, their whispers spread fast. Ghost units weren't just rumors. One of them had been standing among them all along. But the real storm wasn't the arrest, it was what came next. The ceremony. For 5 years, families of the fallen had been given nothing but silence. Official reports marked classified. Deaths explained away as accidents, mistakes, training errors. Now the truth had to surface. The hall was transformed, rows of chairs, 6 portraits at the front. Sarah, Maya, Jessica, Ashley, Diana, Catherine. Faces lit softly, honored at last. Rachel stood in a dress uniform untouched for 5 years. The medals felt foreign on her chest, heavy with memories she'd carried alone. One by one, families approached her. Mrs. Martinez, hands trembling, touched Rachel's face. "You were with her, with my Sarah." Rachel nodded. "Every day. She was the bravest person I've ever known. She saved civilians in Aleppo, carried a child from a burning building while under fire. That's who she was." Tears fell, shared by both women. To Maya's brother, She told of the perfect shot that saved a convoy. To Jessica's parents, she described surgeries performed with nothing but improvised tools, saving Marines under impossible conditions. To Ashley's father, she explained how intercepted communications had prevented attacks that would have killed dozens. They called us ghosts, Rachel told them all, because we weren't supposed to exist, because women weren't supposed to fight where we fought to survive what we survived, but we were real. Their courage was real. Their sacrifice was real, and today, finally, it is recognized. Morrison read aloud citations long buried in classified files. Bronze stars, Purple Hearts, intelligence commendations. Their names would finally live in records, not shadows. The hall filled with both grief and pride. Families embraced Rachel, thanking her, mourning with her, sharing in a truth denied for years. And yet, even as she felt their gratitude, her eyes were drawn to the seventh star on her tattoo, empty, waiting. She thought it would hold her own name, but perhaps it was something else, something still unfinished. Because as the ceremony ended, as rifles fired the 21-gun salute, her phone buzzed again. A message that made her blood turn cold. 7 stars became 6. Soon 6 becomes 5, unless the 7th joins us. Loading dock, 10 minutes, come alone. Signed B. Rachel stared at the message, pulse quickening. Bishop, Ethan Bishop, dead for 3 years, or so she thought. She looked at the families filing out, finally at peace. She looked at Morrison coordinating quietly with security. Then she looked back at the message. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. Why did the message use his name, if Bishop had been dead for years? Rachel stared at her phone, the red glow of the emergency lighting painting her skin in a warlike hue. Her pulse quickened, not with fear, but with the cold certainty of someone who had just seen the past reach out of its grave. 7 stars become 6. Soon 6 becomes 5 unless the 7th joins us. Loading dock, 10 minutes, alone. It was signed simply, B. Bishop, Ethan Bishop, her old teammate, her tech specialist, her ghost. He'd died in Romania, or so she'd believed. She'd seen the body bag. She grieved quietly, silently, as she had for the others. But the message was unmistakable. It carried his codes, his signature, his shadow. And now, after 5 years, it carried a threat. Rachel slipped her phone into her pocket, eyes sweeping the hall. Families embraced. Soldiers saluted. Morrison coordinated the dignified exit, his presence steady, protective. She felt the weight of a choice. Tell him and risk losing the moment. Risk the families, closure unraveling in chaos. Or answer the call alone. Her gaze drifted to the portraits of her fallen sisters. 6 faces, 1 unmarked star. Something deeper than obligation pulled her. She had to know. Going somewhere, Morrison's voice stopped her at the door. Rachel froze. He was sharper than she wanted to admit. She lied softly. The ceremony, it was a lot. Morrison studied her for a long moment. His eyes, lined with decades of battle, saw through the half-truth. But he didn't push. He gave her space. Be careful, was all he said. She nodded once, then slipped into the night. The base was alive with sirens. Reports of a breach near Sector 7. Security vehicles tore across gravel roads. Red floodlights pulsed against steel fencing. But Rachel moved like a shadow, low, deliberate, invisible, old instincts guiding every step. The loading dock loomed ahead, dark except for a few emergency lamps humming against the silence. Shadows pooled deep. Rachel counted 3 possible sniper nests, 2 ambush points, 1 vehicle idling near the far gate. Her pulse slowed, not quickened. 55 beats per minute, perfect control. Then he stepped out. At first her mind rejected him. Too thin, gaunt, beard grown wild, clothes worn but deliberate. Not the clean-cut operator she remembered. Not the bishop who'd quoted manuals, who'd double-checked comms, who'd been the book to her instinct. But the voice, when it came, it froze her. "Hello, Seven. You look well for a dead woman." Her throat tightened. "Ethan." He smiled faintly, though it didn't touch his eyes. "Same way you survived, by becoming someone else." Rachel's hand brushed her holster. "Romania, I saw the body." Bishop shook his head slowly. "You saw what someone wanted you to see, just like Blackwater, just like everything else." The idling vehicle's engine rumbled softly. From the driver's seat, a woman she didn't recognize watched with silent precision. Military trained, Rachel could tell instantly by the way her head tracked angles, not movements. "You set me up," Rachel said. "The breach, the message, the threat." "I set you free," Bishop countered. He gestured toward the car. "We don't have time. Security will piece it together soon. Get in, I'll explain." Rachel didn't move. "Explain now." Bishop's face hardened. Romania wasn't an accident. Blackwater wasn't bad intel. They were executions, Rachel, ordered from above. Webb wasn't the architect. He was a pawn. The real betrayal came from higher up. Rachel's stomach turned cold. "Who?" He reached into his bag, slow, deliberate, pulling free a tablet. With a swipe, he brought up a photo. Her heart lurched. Director Nathan Cross, Deputy Director of CIA's Special Activities Division, her handler, the man who had recruited her, trained her, sent her unit to Syria. Her own blood, her own last name. "No," she whispered. Bishop's voice cut like broken glass. "Yes, he marked you, marked all of us. You weren't supposed to survive." The ground felt unsteady beneath her boots. All this time she'd thought Webb was the traitor, the mastermind. But Webb was small, petty, bought and sold by greed. This was worse. Her handler, her teacher, her blood. She forced her voice steady. "Why now? Why come to me after 5 years?" "Because I finally have proof." Bishop handed her a flash drive. Intercepted communications, bank transfers, drone footage from Syria showing our position compromised hours before the ambush. Cross signed the order himself. Rachel's fingers closed around the drive, its weight heavier than lead. "You could have surfaced sooner," she accused. "And what would you have believed?" Bishop's voice cracked with old pain. "That the tech guy who wasn't there when everyone died suddenly appears, claiming the boss set us up. You'd have thought I was a coward, or worse." His words hit hard because they were true. Rachel exhaled slowly. "So what now?" Bishop's eyes darkened. "Now we finish it. Cross is in Dubai in 6 days, off-book meeting, arms dealers, corruption on a scale Webb could never dream of. I've got assets inside his circle. You want justice. You want the truth for the families. Then you come with me. Help me bring him down." Rachel's jaw clenched. Legally, officially, no assassinations, no vigilante justice. "Justice?" Bishop's smile was bitter. "Rachel, our justice system buried us. They made us ghosts. Do you really think men like Cross ever see a courtroom?" "Yes," Rachel said coldly. "Because if we become them, then we've already lost." The driver revved the engine softly, impatient. Rachel's instincts screamed against trust, but something deeper, something older pulled her toward the car. She moved, slow, deliberate, sliding into the back seat. The door shut like the closing of a tomb. The vehicle pulled away from the dock, Fort Bragg receding in the distance. Inside, Bishop spread the files across the seat. Documents, satellite photos, transaction logs, evidence built over years of silence. Evidence too dangerous for one man to hold. "You weren't the only survivor," he said quietly. Rachel's breath caught. 43 operators, Bishop continued. From Delta, SEALs, Air Force, Naval Intelligence. Different missions, different ambushes, all marked for death, all betrayed by their own command. They call themselves what we are, ghosts. Rachel leaned back, the words echoing like a drumbeat. Not the only one. 43 more, betrayed, forgotten. For 5 years she'd carried the weight of being the last, the lone survivor. Now that burden fractured, reshaped into something else. A movement, a network. But in the silence, one question gnawed at her. If 43 ghosts were out there waiting in the shadows, what did they want? Justice or revenge? As the vehicle turned off the main road into the North Carolina wilderness, Bishop leaned closer. His voice was almost a whisper. Cross doesn't fear soldiers, Rachel. He fears stories. He fears the truth coming to light. You, Ghost 7, are the story he couldn't kill. That's why we need you. Rachel's hand brushed the 7th star on her tattoo, still unmarked. For years she thought it belonged to her. Perhaps now it belonged to something else, something larger. The car slowed, headlights cutting through thick pines. Ahead a ranger station appeared, abandoned to the eye. But Rachel's trained gaze caught the details: cameras disguised as knots in the wood, reinforced doors, antennas masked as dead trees. This wasn't abandonment, it was a fortress. Inside, 3 figures waited. Their postures gave them away instantly: alert, balanced, predatory. Operators, survivors, ghosts. Bishop gestured with a grim smile. Rachel Cross, Ghost 7, meet what's left of Operation Tombstone. What did survival look like after betrayal? The door of the safe house groaned open, its reinforced hinges whispering of secrets meant to outlast storms. Inside, the air was cooler, metallic with recycled ventilation, tinged faintly with oil and steel. Rachel stepped through cautiously, her senses sharpened, heart steady despite the unease stirring in her chest. 3 figures waited. They weren't dressed in uniform, but their posture gave them away instantly. The subtle lean of weight on the balls of their feet, hands positioned for immediate motion, eyes scanning her not casually but in fragments: entry points, escape routes, weapon locations. Operators, survivors, predators who had been prey once and never forgot it. Bishop introduced them one by one. Daniels, Delta Force, Somalia 2016. His team wiped in a night raid that was never logged, only survivor. The man was broad-shouldered, weathered, scars etched deep into his face like maps of battles lost and endured. His eyes met Rachel's, steady, cautious, carrying the kind of gravity that comes from men who have buried too many friends. Chen, Naval Intelligence, Philippines 2017. Surveillance team ambushed. Helicopter crash ruled mechanical failure. She walked away when nobody was supposed to. Chen gave a curt nod. Her gaze was cool, analytical, carrying a sharpness Rachel recognized instantly. An intelligence officer who'd seen too much and trusted too little. Rodriguez, Air Force Special Operations, Afghanistan 2018. Transport shot down outside Kandahar. Black box tampered with, 32 dead, 1 survivor. Rodriguez leaned against the far wall, arms crossed. His smile was faint, bitter, as if mocking the absurdity of being alive when others were. These, Bishop finished, are ghosts like you. Rachel studied each of them. For years, she'd believed she was alone, carrying the weight of her sister's deaths in silence. Now here they stood, living testaments to the same betrayal, each face a mirror of her own past, each scar an echo of the ambushes designed not to fail but to kill. But her instinct didn't relax. If anything, it sharpened, because survivors weren't always allies. Sometimes survival bred desperation, vengeance, fractures. "Why bring me here?" she asked quietly. Chen answered, voice clipped, every word precise. "Because Bishop says you're the key, the one with credibility, the one who can still walk into Morrison's office and be believed." Rodriguez's smirk deepened, the one they didn't bury hard enough. Daniels didn't speak. He just watched her with eyes like stone. Bishop gestured to the table at the center of the room. Files, drives, photographs, communication intercepts, all spread in meticulous order. Proof of 5 years of shadow work. Cross has been building a machine, Bishop explained. Webb was small, middle management, greedy, but Cross, he's the architect. He's been scrubbing operators across branches. Anyone with knowledge of missions too sensitive for daylight. He eliminates them, rewrites the record, redirects funds into his own networks. Arms, intelligence, black budgets, a warlord in a suit. Rachel's jaw tightened. She forced herself to look at the photos. Surveillance stills of Cross in meetings. Transaction logs showing millions moved offshore. Intercepted calls with shadowy voices in languages Rachel recognized: Russian, Arabic, Farsi. It wasn't just betrayal, it was treason. Rodriguez broke the silence. We've all been waiting, years of hiding, watching, training. You know what happens to soldiers left in the shadows too long? We rot. We turn on ourselves. We need a strike. Not in 6 days, not in 6 months, now. Chen cut in sharply. Revenge is a bullet. Justice is a record. If we shoot Cross, the machine survives. If we expose him, the machine burns. Daniels finally spoke, his voice deep, steady. Exposure requires someone they can't dismiss, someone they still trust. That's why you're here, Ghost 7. You're the story, the survivor, the name they can't deny. Rachel felt the weight of their stares, the heat of expectation pressing like the desert sun. For years, she had hidden in silence, her survival a curse. Now, they wanted her survival to be the weapon. "Let me see everything," she said. Bishop slid the evidence toward her. 5 years of my life. Every file, every witness statement, every anomaly I tracked. It all points to Cross. Rachel sifted through pages, scanning with a soldier's efficiency, pausing where instinct snagged. A flight manifest altered hours after takeoff. A drone feed cut 5 minutes before an ambush. A memo unsigned but in Cross's language, redirecting support teams at the last second. She stopped on one file, her own, not the sanitized version Morrison had shown her, the real one. Notes in cold, bureaucratic language. Agent Cross demonstrates exceptional ability but asks too many questions. Recommend termination at earliest convenience. Signed, NC. Her blood chilled. Her own handler, her own names, her own blood. Rodriguez leaned forward, reading her face. Now you see, we don't have time for trials. You put a bullet in Cross and this ends. Rachel's eyes lifted, sharp as blades. No, that makes us executioners. That makes us the same as them. Chen's voice was harsh. They killed our teams. Our families think we're dead. You still believe in rules, in oversight. Because if we stop believing, Rachel said coldly, then the only thing left is vengeance. And vengeance burns everything, including us. Daniel's gaze softened for the first time. She's right. If we become them, then none of this matters. The tension cracked, silence filling the space. Bishop broke it. We have 6 days. Cross will be in Dubai, off books, meeting arms dealers. I have an asset inside his circle. She can get us close, but without you, Rachel, it's just whispers. With you, it's testimony, it's undeniable. Rachel closed the file slowly. She looked at each of them one by one. Bishop, haunted and burning with purpose. Chen, sharp-edged, teetering on bitterness. Rodriguez, leaning toward vengeance. Daniels, grounded but scarred. She saw herself in all of them, and she hated it. "You want me to be the face," she said. Bishop nodded. "You already are." Rachel rose from the chair. The serpent tattoo burned on her arm, the 7th star still unmarked. She felt the weight of the drive in her pocket. 48 hours, she said. I'll verify everything independently. If it checks out, I'll help, but we do it by the book. No assassinations, no blood for pride. Rodriguez scoffed, and if you decide otherwise. Rachel's eyes didn't flinch. Then I'll shut you down myself. The room stilled. Weapons twitched, hands tense, but Bishop lifted a hand, calming the storm. That's why she's the key, he said softly, because she does what's right, not what's easy. Rachel turned toward the door. The forest outside loomed like a shadowed sea. Bishop walked her back to the vehicle, silence heavy between them. You know Cross won't go quietly, he said. He has connections, protection. Going after him officially means painting a target on your back. Rachel's reply was sharp, cold. I've had a target on my back for 5 years. At least now I know who's aiming. As the car wound back toward Fort Bragg, Rachel leaned against the window, eyes on the night sky. She thought of the families she'd comforted just hours before, of the portraits, of her sister's names, of the empty star. The ghosts weren't just hers anymore. They were everywhere, waiting, watching. When the vehicle stopped near the base checkpoint, Rachel slipped out silently. Bishop, the driver, called after her. We wanted to be there at the ceremony, to honor them. Rachel paused, turning back. They know, she said softly. Wherever they are, they know. The car disappeared into the night. Rachel walked toward the checkpoint lights, her steps steady, her heart heavy. The guards recognized her, concern flickering in their eyes. She gave them what they expected, the look of a woman worn thin by grief. Inside her pocket, the drive weighed like a stone. Proof, evidence, betrayal. 48 hours, that was all she gave herself. 48 hours to confirm the truth. 48 hours before the ghosts rose from the shadows. Why did Morrison look at her, as if he already knew? Rachel returned to Fort Bragg just past midnight. The base was quiet, the stillness broken only by the hum of generators and the occasional bark of a dog in the distance. But the quiet wasn't peace, it was pressure. Every step across the concrete felt like walking deeper into a storm she could no longer avoid. Morrison waited for her in his office. Lights low, blinds half closed. His posture was steady, but his eyes carried something heavier than curiosity. You vanished after the ceremony, he said softly. Not an accusation, a fact. Rachel closed the door behind her. I needed air. Morrison studied her. He'd been in the game too long not to notice the weight she carried, the flicker of exhaustion in her eyes, the way her hand never strayed far from her hip. You've got something on your mind. Rachel's jaw flexed. She thought of the drive in her pocket, the files, Bishop's face, the ghosts waiting in their safe house. How much could she tell him? How much did he already suspect? You ever wonder, Rachel asked quietly, if survival is just another kind of failure? Morrison leaned back slowly, arms crossing. Every survivor wonders that, especially the good ones. Rachel swallowed hard. The families today, they got closure, but what if there's more? What if the truth isn't finished? Morrison's eyes narrowed. What truth are we talking about? Rachel's hand brushed the drive, the plastic warm from her palm. She wanted to hand it over, to unload the burden onto his desk, let him see what Bishop had shown her. But something inside her hesitated. Trust was earned in blood, not assumed. And if Cross had betrayed them, who else might be compromised? Instead, she answered with half-truths. I think Webb wasn't acting alone. He was too small. Someone higher signed off, someone with power. Morrison didn't flinch. I know. Rachel blinked. You know. I've suspected for years. Morrison's voice was heavy. But suspicion without proof gets men killed, gets families burned. So I've waited, collected whispers, watched patterns, and now you're here saying it out loud. Rachel's chest tightened. She thought of the ghosts in the safe house demanding vengeance. She thought of Bishop, his voice cracking with old betrayal. She thought of the seventh star still unmarked. You think it's Cross, Morrison said flatly. Rachel didn't answer, but her silence was enough. Morrison exhaled, slow and heavy, as though releasing a truth too long buried. Cross was my mentor once, taught me half of what I know, but he got greedy. I cut ties, he climbed higher. I thought maybe I was wrong about him, but I was. Rachel felt her pulse spike. Why didn't you stop him? Morrison's eyes hardened. Because men like him don't fall to accusations, they fall to proof. Cold, undeniable, the kind that burns in daylight. Rachel slid the drive halfway across the desk. Her hand lingered. This might be it. Morrison didn't touch it yet. He looked at her instead, his gaze sharp, steady. And where did you get this? Rachel's silence stretched. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears. Rachel, Morrison's tone softened. If you've made contact with others, you need to tell me. She finally met his eyes. Would you believe me if I said Bishop's alive? The silence was electric. Morrison's expression didn't break, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, relief, dread. Show me, he said. Rachel pushed the drive fully across the desk. Morrison picked it up, weighing it as if it were heavier than metal. He slid it into a secure port, screens lighting up. Lines of data, photographs, transfers, memos. The room filled with proof. Morrison leaned forward, his jaw tightening with each new file. Damn. Rachel watched him. Now you see. He rubbed his temples. This isn't just treason. This is systemic. Cross has his hooks in contractors, in foreign partners, even in our own oversight committees. If this leaks wrong, it's chaos. Allies turning on allies, enemies emboldened, soldiers caught in the middle. Rachel's voice was steady, cold. If it doesn't leak, then the machine keeps killing people like us. Morrison looked up, meeting her eyes. So what's your plan? Rachel hesitated. She could tell him about Bishop, about Daniels, Chen, Rodriguez, about the ghosts who wanted her to lead them into fire. But a voice inside whispered caution. If Morrison had known about Cross all these years, why had he waited? Why hadn't he acted sooner? I don't have one yet, she said finally, but I will. Morrison studied her for a long time. Then, unexpectedly, he leaned back and gave a faint, weary smile. You remind me of myself once, before I learned how much survival costs. Rachel rose. Her legs felt heavier than before. She reached for the door, but Morrison's voice stopped her. Rachel. She turned. Whatever you decide, don't carry it alone. That's how ghosts stay ghosts. Her throat tightened, but she gave a single nod before slipping back into the night. The next 48 hours blurred into shadow work. Rachel didn't sleep. She combed through the files Bishop had given her, cross-checking every lead with her own access. Every discrepancy matched, every anomaly lined up. Flight manifests altered, drone feeds cut, satellite pings erased, Cross's fingerprints hidden but undeniable. She pieced it together like a sniper aligning crosshairs. Every detail confirmed what she didn't want to admit. Cross had betrayed them. She walked the base during the day, blending into routine, training drills, weapons checks, safety protocols. But behind her calm exterior, her mind raced. Every soldier she passed, who did they serve? Which chain of command was still intact? Which had rotted under Cross's reach? Brooks avoided her, exposed as Webb's plant. Hayes and Williams kept their distance, shame still clinging to their posture. Cooper, the only one who had defended her, gave her a look once, a simple nod, silent solidarity. At night, Rachel returned to her quarters, blinds drawn, laptop glowing faintly. She listened to old recordings Bishop had captured. Cross's voice, calm and cold, speaking of asset reductions and operational liabilities. Each phrase a death sentence for operators who never knew they'd been betrayed. She found herself staring at her tattoo again. The serpent, the stars, 6 marked, 1 empty. She thought it would mark her own death. Now she wondered if it was meant for something else. On the second night she felt it, the shift in the air. A shadow where there shouldn't be one. A whisper of motion outside her window. Rachel's instincts screamed. She killed the light, rolled low, drew her sidearm. 3 seconds later, the door lock clicked. She was already in position, weapon aimed, breath steady. The door creaked open, and Bishop stepped inside. He froze when he saw her in the dark, gun steady, eyes unblinking. Then slowly, he raised his hands. "Good to see you still don't miss," he said softly. Rachel lowered the weapon, but only slightly. "You shouldn't be here." "I had to," Bishop replied. "You gave yourself 48 hours. I couldn't wait that long." Rachel's tone was sharp. "Why?" "Because Cross knows you're alive." The words hit like a hammer. Bishop closed the door, voice dropping to a whisper. He's moving faster than we thought. His meeting in Dubai, it's not 6 days, it's 3. He's accelerating, which means we have less time to prepare or no chance at all. Rachel's stomach tightened. The window was closing. "What do you want from me?" she asked. Bishop's eyes gleamed in the dim light. "What I've always wanted, for you to lead us, for Ghost 7 to finish what the Ghost started." Rachel exhaled slowly, the weight pressing harder on her chest. 3 days, a traitor above them all, 43 ghosts waiting in the shadows. And the choice she could no longer avoid. What line do you cross when betrayal lives in your own blood? Rachel stood in the safe house again, staring at the map spread across the table. Dubai glimmered in satellite photos, its skyscrapers rising like jagged teeth from desert sand. Flight paths, surveillance grids, convoy routes, everything marked in colored ink. Around her, the ghosts planned with a precision that spoke of years spent waiting for a single moment. Daniels traced a thick finger across the Burj Al Arab Hotel. Cross will meet his contacts here, not in the public wings, sub-level conference suites, access through private elevators. Chen added, security will be layered. Local police, private contractors, and at least 3 American assets loyal to him. He'll make it look like a diplomatic trade mission, but behind closed doors, it's arms, drones, software. Rodriguez leaned forward, his smirk tight with anger. "Then we go in hard. Breach, clear, extract. 1 bullet to the skull, and this ends before he shakes another hand." Rachel's jaw clenched. "You think killing him ends it? Cross isn't a man, he's a system. You shoot him, another steps in. You'll get a headline, not justice." Rodriguez's eyes burned. "Justice? You really think a courtroom holds men like him? They'll bury it in red tape until we're bones in the ground. Meanwhile, more operators die. More families get folded flags." Chen's voice was sharp. "And what do you suggest, Rodriguez? That we become executioners? That's what Cross already made us. Ghosts." The room pulsed with silence. Rachel forced herself to speak steadily. "We need exposure, proof. The files Bishop has, they're strong, but they're whispers without a voice. Someone has to put their name to them, someone undeniable." All eyes turned to her. "You," Daniel said simply. Rachel felt the weight again, the expectation, the burden. Ghost 7, the survivor, the one who carried not only her sister's memory, but now 43 others. She swallowed. "I'll stand before cameras, Congress, the families, whatever it takes. But if we kill Cross in Dubai, none of that matters. We'll be fugitives, terrorists. They'll erase us for good." Rodriguez slammed a fist against the table. "Better erased on our terms than theirs." The map quivered under the blow. Bishop raised a hand, calming the storm. His face was worn, haunted, but his voice cut steady. "We can't fracture. If we fracture, Cross wins. We've waited too long to burn each other now." Rachel turned to him, searching his eyes. "And what do you want, Ethan? Justice or vengeance?" His silence lasted too long. Finally, he said, "I want it to end." But Rachel heard what he didn't say. Preparations consumed the next 2 days. Rachel trained with the ghosts, movements fluid, instincts alive again. She fired at ranges, hands steady despite old scars. She drilled entry tactics, ran mock extractions, tested communications. The rhythm of her old life returned, sweat, breath, precision. But each night when the training ended, the weight returned heavier. She sat alone, staring at the 7th star on her tattoo, unmarked, empty, waiting. Her sisters' faces haunted her, Sarah's laughter echoing in broken streets, Maya's calm breathing before a shot, Jessica's steady hands under fire, Ashley's whispered humor when fear was loudest, Diana's fire, Catherine's command. 6 voices silenced, 1 left behind. Sometimes she closed her eyes and wondered if she should have died with them, if survival was strength or just unfinished punishment. Daniels found her once, sitting in the dark. He lowered himself beside her, his frame massive against the shadows. "You remind me of my sergeant," he said quietly. "Good man. Always carried the weight like it was his alone. You know how that ended." Rachel looked at him. "How?" Daniel's voice cracked slightly. "Suicide. Gun in the locker room after Somalia. He carried too much, never shared it. We can't do this alone, Rachel. None of us." His hand rested briefly on her shoulder, steady as stone. Then he left her with the silence again. The night before departure, Bishop pulled Rachel aside. They stood outside, the desert wind brushing against them, stars sharp and merciless overhead. "You don't trust me," Bishop said. Rachel didn't answer. Silence was answer enough. He sighed. "I don't blame you. I disappeared. I let you carry it alone. That's on me." Rachel's voice was flat. "You let me believe you were dead." "I had to," Bishop said, pain flickering across his face. "If Cross knew I'd survived Romania, he'd have hunted me harder. Better you thought I was gone than you got pulled into his net." Rachel shook her head. "You don't get to decide that for me." His jaw tightened. "Maybe not, but I did. And now I need you to believe me when I say this is our last chance. Cross isn't coming back to the States. Dubai is his stage. If we miss, he disappears into holes we'll never reach." Rachel's breath shivered, but her voice held steady. "Then we don't miss, but we don't kill him, Ethan. We drag him into the light, alive." Bishop's eyes searched hers. For a moment she thought he might argue, but instead he gave the smallest nod. "Alive," he said. It sounded like a lie, but it was enough for now. The flight was quiet, too quiet. The four ghosts and Rachel boarded a private military transport under false identities. The hum of the engines filled the space, but no one spoke much, each of them lost in their own ghosts. Chen sat with eyes closed, lips moving silently, memorizing floor plans she already knew by heart. Daniels cleaned his weapon slowly, reverently, as if polishing away memories. Rodriguez tapped a bullet against the metal wall, over and over, the rhythm like a ticking clock. Rachel sat apart, gaze fixed on the window. The night stretched endless outside, but in her mind she saw the faces again. Her sisters, her unit, their last mission. The way Catherine had looked back at her in Syria, right before the blast tore everything apart. "You're not done yet, Rachel," Catherine had said. Rachel closed her eyes. No, she was. Dubai hit like a fever dream. Heat rising from glass towers, streets glowing with wealth and shadows alike. Rachel felt the weight of every eye, every camera. A city where surveillance was constant but silence was currency. They settled in a safe apartment high above the harbor. From the balcony, Rachel watched the city breathe, lights shimmering against the Gulf. Chen spread blueprints across the table. Conference level, subfloor 3. Private elevators require biometric access. Rodriguez, Daniels, you'll be outer perimeter. Bishop and I run surveillance. Rachel, you're in the suite. If Cross sees you alive, it destabilizes him. He won't think straight. That's our opening." Rachel absorbed it all. Timing, angles, escape routes. But her focus wasn't just on the plan, it was on the fault lines in the team. Rodriguez wanted blood, Chen wanted exposure, Daniels wanted order, Bishop wanted closure. And Rachel wanted truth. But truth had a price, and she could feel it coming closer with every breath. The night before the meet, Rachel lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her body ached with tension, her mind replaying every choice, every lie, every scar. A voice whispered in the dark, "Can't sleep." She turned. Bishop leaned against the doorway, eyes tired, haunted. "Not really," she admitted. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Tomorrow if it goes wrong." Rachel cut him off. "It won't." But he didn't stop. "If it does, promise me something." Rachel's throat tightened. "What?" "Don't die for nothing." The words cut deep, because for 5 years she had lived wondering if she already had. She didn't promise him. She just closed her eyes again, letting silence speak where words failed. Tomorrow would decide. Not just for her, not just for the ghosts, but for every name written in the shadows. Why does the world look smaller when you're standing on the edge of doing the thing that cannot be undone? Lights of Dubai blurred into streaks as the van slid through late-night traffic, a glass and steel river pulsing with wealth and shadow. Rachel felt the city's heartbeat through the floorboard, something affluent and godlike, something that hid whole economies inside its pockets. From the back seat, she watched skyscrapers climb like watchtowers and felt a familiar tightness behind her ribs, as if those towers were drawing the air out of her lungs. They arrived at the hotel from a service entrance that smelled of motor oil and old marble. Bishop moved like a man who loved maps more than people. He signed names, exchanged nods, and wound a path for them through corridors few eyes saw. Rachel's steps were measured, each footfall practiced. She felt the ghosts at her back and the ghosts in her blood. Every plan was stacked in her head like cards. Fail one, and everything collapsed. They split as rehearsed. Daniels and Rodriguez took the outer sweep, two loud shadows that loved the smell of confrontation. Chen and Bishop watched cameras and chatter, knee-deep in playlists of security feeds and guard rotations, translating surveillance into choreography. Rachel moved into the suite. The seams of the operation slid together around her like a second skin. She paused just outside the private elevator the asset had arranged, private biometric access, security that would unlock only with the right hand on the right pad, then looked at her reflection in the polished steel. Tired eyes, tattoo hidden beneath sleeve, the small scars on her jaw. She swallowed, the throat work of an actor stepping into a role you must make true. The elevator hummed and rose, private and single-minded. The door opened into a corridor lined with art that pretended to be old money. The sweet key card glided against its reader and the door sighed open. For a nanosecond, the hotel room was ordinary, velvet chairs, a bar with expensive bottles lined like silent witnesses. Then the op began to breathe. The soundproofing, the double locks, the tempered glass watching the sea. Cross's voice came down the hall before his shadow. Smooth, cultured, the kind of voice that signed contracts and dismissed conscience. He was in mid-sentence as he greeted his guests, arms dealers, a couple of diplomats turned merchants, a local fixer whose eyes flicked like a hungry animal. He wore the ease of a man who has always been allowed to be both charming and cruel in the same breath. When Cross looked up and saw her, his smile curdled into something smaller, faster. Recognition snapped at his face for a half-second. Then it was gone, carefully tucked away like contraband. He applauded her presence like she was a prop in his theater. "Rachel Cross," he said, as if confirming a previous chapter. "You look well. I'd almost thought you were a ghost." The room inhaled. Someone in a suit cleared their throat. Cross's laugh was too quick, empty, and then he pivoted, a practiced host. "You shouldn't be here," Rachel said. "And yet you are." His hand fluttered in a way that asked for applause. What a brave surprise. She kept her voice steady. Bishop's feed rendered faces in her ear, numbers, positions, the breathing patterns of the men in the room. Chen's whispers threaded cold facts into her consciousness. The operation moved on them like a living thing. They'd give Cross a stage, and that would be their trap. Cross moved closer, the predator moving through a gilded forest. "You have questions," he said softly. "Curiosity can be a dangerous companion." "You ordered Blackwater," Rachel said. The words dropped like a bullet. They did not echo. The men in the room shifted minutely. The air seemed to thrum with the first crack in a dam. Cross's eyes sharpened. For a heartbeat he looked mortal. Then he smiled again, this time practiced, perfected. Accusations are noisy things. They can be like fireworks, bright, loud, and gone by morning. He blinked as if that litany had been a jest. "You've misread many things, Miss Cross." "You killed women we served with," Rachel said. "You made it look like fate." He placed both hands on the marble table, palms splayed with theatrical serenity. You confuse necessary calculus with murder. Our work is hard. Choices are harder. Regret is for poets, and we are not poets. Voices rustled. Bishop's hand found hers under the table, a quick squeeze. She felt him calibrate time the next piece. "Ladies and gentlemen," Cross said, turning to his associates like a man about to close a deal. "We have a guest. I'm sure she's moved by the grandeur. Let us give her a proper cup of hospitality." Two men in suits moved, too quickly, too sure, trained to make such moves invisible. Guests barely reacted, for them. Men shifted into positions like props on a stage. Daniels and Rodriguez, watching from the wings, read the micro-movements and shifted their perimeter. The whole building was a clockwork where faint missteps could explode into gunfire. Rachel felt the itch rise in Rodriguez's knuckles, the kind of itch that sees blood as an answer. She squeezed back on Bishop's hand, a gentle correction. "Not here," her squeeze said. "Not now." Cross pivoted back. "Stay, soldier," he said, voice gentled with mocking pity. "Tell me your story." He had the terrible confidence of a man who thinks the law is an outline he can color inside or out. She told parts of it, choosing words like stones to sink where they would hurt the most. She spoke of Sarah dragging a child from flames, Maya's steady hands, Jessica's field surgery under light that wasn't always enough, Ashley's intercepts that saved convoys, Diana's instincts, Catherine's command. She named them not like a litany of victims but as a ledger of people owed more than silence. Cross listened with the patience of a man who assumes he has time. He smiled, and there was a flicker, like a fish darting behind a rock. For the first time she saw his armor fissure with doubt. He spoke carefully, almost lazily, and then, as if unveiling the last act, he made an offer. "Someone killed them," he said, words like a masterful trap. "But the world isn't so simple. There are consequences when you move in shadow. Sometimes those consequences are merciful. Sometimes they are necessary." Rachel had thought she'd built a ladder of logic to prove everything: documents, bank transfers, drone clips. Bishop's team had stacked that ladder, rung by rung. But Cross's offer was a mirror. He could frame the darkness as mercy, and a jury that lived by daylight might see it as cleaning rot. She saw his men shift. They were shields for his words. "Why are you telling me this?" she demanded. "Because I prefer transparency," Cross said with a smile that could charm angels. "And because, Miss Cross, truth is a wealthy commodity. You will find that wealth buys quiet or chaos, your choice." He leaned in, the space between them a deliberate intrusion. "I can give you what you want, the truth, but only if you negotiate." Negotiation. The word tasted of old bargains. Rachel thought of the lives. They were not ledger entries. They were names, faces, daughters, sisters. And yet Cross had already called them calculus. He'd already turned them into numbers. Bishop transmitted fast. A plan to move Cross away from the relative safety of his table, to isolate him for the exposes. Daniels and Rodriguez flexed their roles, threat and containment. Chen's probe scanned for external feeds to intercept. Everything was a mesh. The suite hummed with an undercurrent of possibility. They moved then, with a precision that made violence look like a sentence being typed. Daniels and Rodriguez hit the outer doors. The sound they made was a thunderclap outside the suite as they took positions, locked exits, and made the building a ringed stage. Chen closed feeds that might carry the picture out, assuring the world couldn't watch by accident. Bishop slid a microphone into the pocket of a waiter with a brisk tidiness. The waiter smiled, oblivious, and the recording bent the future. Cross noticed only when his guard tripped and the doors failed to open. He scanned the room for menace, and then, with the careful unflappability of predators, he shrugged. "If this is a bit of theater," he said lightly, and then the stage split. Rodriguez burst through the service door in a controlled storm, authority twisted into threat. Cross's security moved with reflex, but their reflexes were designed for contracts and local creeds, not the cold, precise movement of men who'd been sold to death and chose to survive. The room erupted into sudden clarity. This was not a theft, not a hit. It was a reckoning. Cross's face changed in ways Rachel had never seen. The small smile that had been his armor split like thin ice. He moved not with hostility at first, but with the practiced cowardice of a man who thinks money and paperwork will untangle all knots. "Mr. Cross," Rachel said, voice even but sharp, "you orchestrated Blackwater. You routed support, sold positions, turned our radios into silence. You profited off their deaths." She let the words land like charges. They did. Cross laughed once, single and brittle. "You are a talented storyteller," he said. "But what you present as truth, others present as necessity. War is shorthand for hard choices." "You called it necessary," Bishop said, stepping forward into the light for the first time. "You called it cleanup. We call it murder." Cross's people moved closer, men in suits with small hands and big lies. He reached for a phone, a reflex, a plan. Daniel's hand stopped the phone with an efficient, brutal motion. A silenced confrontation, a microphone catching every breath. Chen's voice found Rachel's ear through the comms. "There's chatter coming in, they're calling for backup." Time collapsed. Rachel's stomach dropped into a place she felt in Afghanistan, in Syria, danger that smelled like betrayal. Rodriguez's jaw worked. He wanted to make it simple, like the men who'd waited in Somalia, one clean strike. He glanced at Rachel. Her eyes told him simply, "No, not here, not like this. We will take him alive." Cross, for all his cold, had the reflex of systems. When his organization felt threatened, he pushed his leverage. He played the diplomat, the merchant. He offered a dozen small concessions, each of them a worm on a hook. He offered evidence, what he claimed were documents if they stepped back now. "I will give you answers if you pull back," he said, voice silk and teeth. "I will give you the names, the files, a deal." Rachel felt the old temptation. The easy, clean surrender that turns everything into a story recorded in polished leather. There was danger in taking the deal. Cross's fabric would be woven into the truth, and paper would be the same camouflage it always was. But there was urgency, and proof can be weaponized. If he spoke and lied under pressure, that recording could burn him. She asked one question. Live, on record, in front of those families, with legal counsel. She felt every eye in the room. Cross smiled as if she had asked for a trifle. "On record," he said, "I will speak and I will explain." Bishop's whisper in her ear was a razor. Don't trust him. This man built the ledger of lies. Daniel's presence was a reminder of appetite. Chen's fingers danced over the interface, ready to log every word. Rachel looked at Cross. She thought of the portraits, the families, the faces of her fallen sisters. She thought of Bishop and the ghosts who wanted more than exposure. They wanted a purge. She thought of Morrison and the rule of law that might protect the future from becoming another grave. Then she nodded. "All right," she said. "You speak on record, we record, we bring witnesses, we take it public." Cross's smile flickered, then returned like a mask. "Very well," he said, and the room held its breath as a man who had built empires of silence prepared to speak into the one recording he believed he could still shape. Outside, Daniels tapped a rhythm on his kneecap, a staccato of readiness. Inside, cameras were prepared, microphones hidden, a legal lockbox ready to seal the evidence. The plan to expose a man of habit was a dangerous ballet. It required trust in a system that had failed them before. If it worked, the machine could be crippled. If it failed, they would be monsters on the run. When Cross began to speak, the first thing he did was charm the room. He spoke of logistics and necessity, of chain of command and fog, of tragedies that happen in war. His voice was a slow trickle of obfuscation, laced with self-justification. But then Bishop slipped him a bite he couldn't swallow quietly. A document with timestamps, transcriptions, transfer logs that matched the drone feeds, and a microphone that picked up every reluctant breath and flinch. Cross faltered. For the first time he seemed mortal. He blinked, and then the room felt like an island in a storm where only truth could sink ships. The first confession quivered like a wire. A name, a date, a flight manifest. Cross's defense collapsed into small, desperate defenses, plausible deniability, mislabeling, calls misrouted. The men around him shifted. He tried to bargain. He tried to charm. He tried his old hands at manipulation. Outside, the world was normal, a city that prided itself on smiling through storms. Inside, a different world coalesced. One woman's steady voice, a band of survivors, a man who had been the architect of their deaths trying to make himself reasonable. The microphones drank every word. The cameras blinked like neutral gods. But in the middle of the room, the ghosts watched one another. Rodriguez had his hand on a pistol. Daniel's fingers flexed. Bishop had the drive hidden under his jacket like a heart of ice. And Rachel, she listened. She kept her face neutral while her head filled with the sound of names collecting into a net. Then at the edge of that fragile balance the door slammed. A sound like war. Footsteps flooded the corridor, local security, called in perhaps by Cross's men or by someone who trusted power more than truth. The clock slammed down. The room snapped from rehearsed theater to raw physics. Cross's legal offer turned into a bargaining war of seconds. Outside voices were raw and hungry. The curtains of possibility closed in. Rachel's breath narrowed. She had a choice to make, to take a man's recorded words and try a system that had buried them, or to move like a tribunal with its gavel ready. This was the knife edge where all their philosophies met. Law or vengeance, dignity or annihilation, the future or the immediate righteous rage that threatened to consume them. The vanishing window of choice bent reality toward either an exposure that might change the world or a storm that would shake it into new lunacy. She swallowed. The microphones, the cameras, the family names, they all steadied in her chest like a compass. "Speak," she said softly, not to Cross but to truth itself. "We'll let you make your case." Cross inhaled, and the first line came out like smoke. The recording went live, and a man who thought he had no debts began to speak his ledger aloud. Why does truth always feel heavier when it finally leaves the shadows? The recording was still live when the first bullets cracked against the suite's reinforced glass. The sound punched through the room like thunder trapped in a bottle. Cross flinched, words breaking, while his security scrambled, pulling weapons, their movements jagged with fear. Rachel's instinct kicked instantly, calm, controlled, surgical. Hold position. Nobody fires. But Rodriguez had already drawn, his eyes bright with the promise of release. "This is it. We end him here." "No," Rachel snapped, her voice cold as steel. "Not like this." Daniels braced against the door as shadows slammed against it from outside. "We don't have long, Rachel. They'll breach." Chen's voice came through the comms, tight with urgency. "Local security plus Cross's private detail. Dozens, maybe more. If we fight, we'll be ghosts for real this time." Rachel's eyes locked on Cross. He was pale now, slick with sweat, but even cornered he wore the arrogance of men who believed they were untouchable. "You think you can drag me into court?" he hissed. "I'll be buried in lawyers before the ink dries." "Not if the world hears you first," Rachel said. She tapped her comm. Chen pushed the feed. A pause, then Chen's whisper, "To where?" Rachel's throat tightened. She thought of the portraits at the ceremony, of the families who had thanked her, of the mothers who had held her hand with trembling fingers. "Everywhere," she said. The sweet lights flickered as Chen worked. A dozen silent connections bloomed like sparks, encrypted lines bouncing across continents, feeds tunneling through hidden nodes, fragments of Cross's voice weaving their way into channels he couldn't buy or bury. And then live. Screens across the world began to blink awake. Networks, journalists, watchdog groups, even personal phones hidden in dusty drawers, all fed with a man's own words, his ledger of betrayal, his cold calculus laid bare. Cross realized too late. His face twisted in a way Rachel had never seen before. Not anger, not fear, but something rarer. Power slipping from his grip. "You think the truth saves you," he spat. "Truth burns everything, it burns you too." Rachel leaned close, her voice steady, measured, meant not just for him but for the millions already listening. "Sometimes, fire is the only way forward." The breach came hard. Doors splintered. Flashbangs erupted white and brutal, the suite filled with chaos. Daniels absorbed the shock like a wall, shielding Rachel and Bishop. Rodriguez fired not at Cross but at the wave pouring in. Chen shouted positions, her voice sharp as a knife. Rachel moved through the storm like water, not panicked, not desperate, precise. She disarmed one, tripped another, put her shoulder into the third. She fought not to kill, but to survive, to buy seconds, to hold the line. Cross tried to slip in the noise, hand clawing toward the service exit. Bishop intercepted him, tackling him hard, drive still clutched in his jacket. Rodriguez growled, pressing barrel against Cross's temple. One clean shot. "Stand down," Rachel roared. Her voice split the room. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Even the gunfire outside seemed to pause. Rodriguez's finger trembled on the trigger, his jaw clenched, and then, slowly, painfully, he lowered the weapon. Rachel's eyes softened for a fraction. "Thank you," she whispered. Extraction was fire and thunder. Daniels led them through a breach in the stairwell, carrying 2 wounds and still moving like a mountain. Bishop hauled Cross, his weight dragging but his arrogance finally stripped away. Chen guided them through blind corridors, rerouting cameras, misdirecting security with false alarms. Rachel was last out, covering, eyes sharp, pulse steady. Every corner felt like a lifetime, every breath a gift. They reached the waiting vehicle. Doors slammed. The city blurred again, lights streaking like comets as they tore through streets toward the Gulf. In the back seat, Cross seethed, wrists bound, voice venomous. "You think this recording matters? Governments won't touch it, courts will bury it. You'll be hunted, you'll die nameless." Rachel stared at him, her gaze unshaken. "Maybe, but at least the truth won't die with us." By dawn, the world had changed. News outlets everywhere replayed the feed. Cross's voice, calm, arrogant, condemning himself with every syllable, played on loops across continents. Politicians denied, generals deflected, but the families, the ones who had been handed folded flags in silence, finally heard the words they had always suspected. He had named operations, he had named betrayals, and though he tried to mask them as necessary calculus, his tone had betrayed him more than facts ever could. For once, silence did not win. Cross was taken into custody under international authority before American agents could whisk him away. He spat, he cursed, he threatened, but for the first time his words did not shield him. They exposed him. Back in the safe house, the ghost sat in weary silence. Rodriguez drank from a cracked flask, his hands shaking. "We should have ended him, quick, clean. Now we've got years of trials." Chen answered sharply, but her voice softened at the edges. "And those years will be public. Families will see it. His arrogance will be replayed until the world memorizes it. That's better than a bullet." Daniels, bleeding but alive, simply muttered, "We're still here. That's something." Rachel sat apart, staring at the 7th star. Her fingers brushed it lightly, almost reverently. For 5 years it had waited empty, a mark of survival, a reminder of unfinished business. Now it wasn't about her anymore. She rose, fetched a needle and ink, and sat down. Slowly, steadily, she filled the star, not with her own name, but with one word, small and quiet: truth. The others watched, silent. They understood. The serpent was complete. Weeks later, Rachel stood again at a ceremony. Not Fort Bragg this time. Washington. The rotunda was filled with faces, families, journalists, soldiers, officials. The air carried a weight of grief and pride in equal measure. This time no portraits were hidden, no names were scrubbed. Every ghost was honored. Rachel spoke briefly, her voice steady, carrying to every corner of the hall. They called us ghosts because we weren't supposed to exist, because silence was cheaper than truth. But silence isn't justice. Justice is giving names back to the forgotten. Justice is standing here today, not because we want medals, but because they deserve memory. My sisters, my brothers, 43 more like me, and countless others still waiting in shadows. Her throat tightened, but she didn't break. We survived betrayal. We survived silence. And now, maybe for the first time, we are heard. The hall erupted in applause, not the hollow kind, but the heavy, raw kind that comes from people who know loss and know truth. Rachel stepped back, her eyes wet but unbroken. Later, as she walked alone along the reflecting pool outside, Bishop caught up with her. He looked thinner, older, but his eyes carried a strange peace she hadn't seen in years. "You did it," he said softly. "We did it," she corrected. He smiled faintly. "You still don't trust me, do you?" Rachel looked at him for a long time, then shook her head. "No, but maybe I don't need to, not completely." He accepted that with a quiet nod. "So what now?" Rachel's gaze lifted to the horizon, where morning light spilled over the city like a slow tide. "Now we live, as best we can." They stood in silence for a while. The ghosts weren't gone. They never would be. But for the first time, they weren't chained only to betrayal. They were tethered to truth. That night, Rachel sat alone in her quarters. She laid her jacket across the table, metals glinting softly in lamplight. She touched the tattoo on her arm, the serpent, the stars. The seventh one finally filled. For 5 years, she had asked what survival meant, if it was failure, if it was punishment. Now she had an answer. Survival was witness, and witness was the beginning of justice. She whispered softly to herself, to the faces she still carried, to the silence that had never left her. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And with that, Rachel Cross finally let herself breathe.